Those who trekked across the country to begin new lives in the Wild West were known for their resourcefulness, and it shows in many of the foods they ate. While pioneer cuisine may seem strange to us today, the settlers had no choice but to use what they had to survive, and they got pretty creative. Life in the Old West was harsh, journeys were long, and settlers had no guarantees the food they packed on a wagon train would last until their final destination. They hunted local wildlife, used replacement ingredients that traveled well, such as apple cider vinegar to make a passable pie, and preserved everything they could. They also used every part of the animals they ate. Head cheese, anyone?
Does Bianca want some?
Perhaps they even polished off a meal with scamper juice, one of many colorful Wild West slang terms. Much of what cowboys ate was out of necessity rather than preference. But maybe a cup of calf's foot jelly or a plate of roasted squirrel was a real treat. We've compiled a list of the top 15 oddball food items the early pioneers ate, and you won't believe what was on the menu.
You won't believe this.
But first, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for your daily dose of oddball facts. Here are the top 15 oddball menu items that kept the pioneers slim, fed, and satisfied. Number 1. Sweet potato coffee. Real coffee was scarce in the Old West, so pioneers used many coffee substitutes. Pioneers ground up everything from chicory roots to acorns to create similar beverages. One of the more creative alternatives was made with sweet potatoes. Cooked, peeled, mashed, formed into patties with rye flour, then dried in an oven. After the mixture hardened, it was ground into powder and added to water. Sweet potatoes were not considered a great substitute for coffee, but they worked when proper supplies weren't available. Number 2. Roast skunk. Most of us would never consider eating skunks today, but in the Old West, pioneers had to use any food sources they could find. Skunks populate a wide variety of habitats across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, from woodlands to deserts. And while not as big as pigs or sheep, they provide an adequate amount of meat. One old pioneer recipe book includes instructions for roast skunk with a critical note: remove the scent glands before cooking. Number 3. Calf's foot jelly. Though many Americans would probably prefer to eat Jell-O today, calf's foot jelly was a popular dessert in the Old West. It was made using the feet of calves, hooves removed, eggs, sugar, lemon, and spices. After boiling the feet, cooks added white wine, seasonings, and egg whites. One recipe book from Virginia calls for the eggshells to be crushed and added as well. Number 4. Sheep sorrel pie. Sheep sorrel pie doesn't contain any mutton. It's just another example of pioneer creativity. Because lemons were scarce on the prairie, cooks used a native plant called sheep sorrel as a creative substitute when making pies. Shredded sheep sorrel leaves in place of actual lemons gave the pie a flavor close enough to the real thing when in a pinch. Number 5. Vinegar pie. When fresh produce was scarce, pioneers used ingredients like apple cider vinegar in pies to mimic the taste of apples or lemons. Apple cider vinegar, also used for medicinal and cleaning purposes, gives the pie a tart apple or citrus flavor, close enough to satisfy travelers on wagon trails. People still make vinegar pie today. Even Martha Stewart has a recipe, though it calls for butter in the crust rather than what pioneers probably used in lard. Number 6. Bear head cheese. Because bears are so large, they provided a significant amount of meat to pioneer families. This included the head of the bear, and some pioneers used it in a recipe that some modern consumers might know: head cheese. Head cheese isn't cheese. Instead, it's the meat from the head of an animal boiled down, seasoned, and placed into a mold to cool. Once solidified, it's removed from the mold and thinly sliced. Making head cheese was a way for pioneers to preserve every useful part of the animal. Number 7. Son of a stew. The quirkily named son of a stew exemplifies the pioneer attitude of letting nothing go to waste. Out on the trail, rations were tight and every morsel counted. Son of a bee asterisk titch stew was a classic cowboy dish consisting of lean beef, calf liver and heart, bone marrow, sweetbreads and brain, all chopped into small pieces and boiled. The seasonings were simple: salt, pepper and hot sauce. The stew was an efficient way of using parts of the young steer that couldn't be easily preserved. Number 8. Acorn bread. The pioneers were clever when it came to substituting fresh fruits, coffee, and flour. They used things discovered in their new environments, or more often ingredients Native Americans taught them about, to replace diet staples. Ground acorns were often used in place of flour to make acorn bread. They roasted the acorns to remove their strong and irritating bitterness, then ground them up and mixed them with other ingredients. Number 9. Prairie oysters. Better known as Rocky Mountain oysters, prairie oysters are an infamous dish from the West, both past and present. They aren't oysters at all, but rather the tests of calves removed in the neutering process. Cowboys peeled, battered, and fried them on the spot and considered them a delicacy. Prairie oysters are still consumed in rural ranching states today, and annual testicle festivals celebrate this colorfully named snack. Number 10. Beef tea. Beef tea is exactly what it sounds like. Thin strips of beef lightly salted and boiled in water to produce a liquid similar to beef broth. The tea was strained and served warm after it was boiled for 1 to 2 hours. Recipes for beef tea date back to the 1700s, and it was frequently used as a supplement for those who were ill or had weak constitutions. It was also thought to improve appetite.
You have any food here?
People also used lamb, chicken, and sometimes vegetables to make the tea when beef was unavailable. Number 11. Beef tea. In the Old West, jackrabbits were plentiful, easy to catch, a good source of lean meat, and they could be seasoned and roasted just like any other meat source. Subsisting on rabbit meat alone, however, did cause one problem for the early settlers. Some began to suffer from rabbit poisoning, now known as protein poisoning, which occurs when people eat a diet high in protein but without any other nutrients. Because jackrabbit meat is so lean, the settlers weren't getting much fat along with their protein. The condition mimics the symptoms of extreme hunger, even though plenty of calories are being consumed. Number 12. Frizzled beef. Frizzled beef, still served today in some American towns, was a hearty snack or dinner staple for the pioneers. It consists of thinly shaved dried meat, cooked in milk, butter, and flour, then served over toast. The ingredients were easily transportable for the settlers in the Old West, and except for milk, the recipe doesn't include any perishables. Frizzled beef also has a cruder name used by the military: on a shingle. Number 13. Squirrel. For settlers in the Old West, fresh meat was a hard-won prize. They couldn't carry it on wagon trips as there was no way to keep it from spoiling, so they hunted when they could. In some locations, squirrels were a more readily available source of food than deer or buffalo, though harder to hit without damaging the tiny amount of usable meat. Hunters would bark the squirrels out of trees, which meant clipping the bark off the branch beneath them, causing the animals to fall. Number 14. Frying pan bread. On wagon trails, pioneers didn't have ovens, at least not the way we think of them today. While traveling, they would have cooked bread and biscuits in a frying pan. Hence, the dish called frying pan bread. The resulting biscuits wouldn't have looked like those we eat. The pioneers used wholemeal flour rather than white pastry flour. The bread was denser and more filling than these days, a good thing since food needed to satiate appetites for as long as possible. Number 15. Beef and beans. Okay, this one's not actually that surprising, other than the fact that it might be surprising that they had to resort to a lot of the other things on the list when beef and beans were sometimes plentiful. The cowboy standard of beef and beans wasn't so much a recipe as it was a staple of everyday life on cattle drives in the Old West. Many cowboys of the time endured monotonous days where they would eat a combination of beef and beans, two foods that kept and traveled easily for all 3 meals. The beef and beans would sometimes be accompanied by sourdough bread and wild game, and almost always paired with coffee. Tell us below in the comments which of these items would you eat first and which of these would you avoid at all costs. Also, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for your daily dose of oddball facts.